All right, so we are going to get started here with Erica Mattison. Erica is both a career coach and also does consulting work. We heard about Erica first through the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, so shout out to Joelle, Tess, Julia, Kent, the ENC crew. We invited Erica here today to talk a little bit about the job search process and kind of figuring out where your strengths are in that process and some of the places where you can become stronger. We're really excited to bring Erica in. She has an amazing website and blog, so we will link that both in the follow-up email to this retreat and then also in the chat here. So I highly encourage checking out some of the resources she's created for her website. But I will turn it over to her so she can introduce herself.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Marissa. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Seeing some nods. Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. As Marissa said, my name is Erica Mattison, and I started my coaching and consulting practice several years ago now in 2014 after mentoring and informally coaching dozens and dozens of people, college students, recent graduates, graduate students, and it's a pleasure to get to work with people who are mission driven, help them achieve clarity about what they want to do with their careers and their lives, how they can have impact, and what steps they need to take to live their best life and have, really be able to fulfill their potential and do work that is meaningful, that they enjoy, and that takes advantage of their skills. So it's great to be here with you today. And I'm going to start off with a quick story about myself. And then I'd love to engage you in the chat to hear about some of your career questions right off the bat so that we can try to address as many of those as possible today. So when I look back at my career, it's sort of interesting because I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do when I was younger. I think many of us have ideas, but then various things happen in our lives and we may or may not end up on a career trajectory similar to what we had envisioned. And so when I was younger, I would say that sixth grade for me was a pretty pivotal time. I was about 12 years old, growing up in Brookline, Massachusetts. And I started an initiative to advocate for my school to stop using styrofoam trays in the cafeteria. Raise your hand if that resonates with you at all. You ever done anything like that? Yeah, as I got older, I met more and more people who did similar things, and I thought, oh, I'm kind of a member of this tribe. That it's sort of cool of like-minded people out there who see an issue and then decide to do something about it, which is a recurring theme in my life. My parents are community activists and have been for several decades, working on issues like urban parks, in particular the Emerald Necklace. So that is a park system that is near and dear to the Mattison family. I actually grew up just across the street from Olmsted Park in Brookline, which is part of the Emerald Necklace Park system. And when I was growing up, it was really run down. It was lacking in investments. It was overgrown. There were all kinds of issues. And my parents organized with other neighbors and advocated for things like funding and a master planning process for the park system. And over the years, literally out my front door, I was able to see the transformation of this urban park. It went from this place that was really run down and people really didn't want to spend much time to this place that today, if you go there, I'm just curious, raise your hand if you're familiar with Olmsted Park or the Emerald Necklace at all. I'm seeing some hands going up. Yep, wonderful. So this is just kind of down the street from where the Muddy River is, which more of you may know, and kind of down the street also from Jamaica Pond, which is a lovely spot. And so I was able to see this transformation to now what is an absolutely vibrant urban green space with people running and walking and biking and rolling and walking dogs and people of all ages and demographics. And it's a really beautiful thing. And with organizations like the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, there's some wonderful programming as well, things like concerts. And so this example out my front window taught me that when people set their mind to it and they work together and they're persistent, partnering with government and identifying funding sources, both for capital investments as well as for operating expenses, the day-to-day maintenance, it's really amazing what's possible. And so I grew up feeling like I could have an impact, I could make a difference. And I didn't really plan on going into environmental work, but I was passionate about these issues from a young age, participating in tree plantings and organizing park cleanups when I was in elementary school. So it shouldn't be terribly shocking, I guess, that I ended up spending most of my career so far in the environmental space. So back to the sixth grade story, I advocated to the vice principal that we should not be using styrofoam trays in the cafeteria. We should be using reusable trays. And I was successful in this campaign somehow or another. I convinced the administration of my school, Lincoln School, and that was sort of my first certainly one of my earlier environmental advocacy wins. And fast forward a number of years, I created and led a sustainability program at Suffolk University, and then later worked at the Environmental League of Massachusetts as the legislative director, working as an environmental lobbyist on the state level, working on issues like climate change, energy, land use, water, and environmental justice, and on and on. So, my start as a sixth grader, working on challenging the status quo is definitely something that's also been a recurring theme in my life. And then another thing that happened in sixth grade that was really pivotal for me was I founded a school newspaper. I was really passionate about journalism and I always loved to write. So we didn't have a school newspaper and I thought we should. So I started the Lincoln Times and then I was the editor and I was, constantly covering school news and, taking photos and editing pieces that my classmates would submit. And this was a precursor to work that I would do later in my career. Currently, I work at Boston University when I'm not doing career coaching and consulting, and I lead communications for Boston University Sustainability, which is focused on the university's implementation of its climate action plan, which sets a goal of carbon neutrality by 2040. So for some context, that's 10 years ahead of the city of Boston's goal. And so this communications work was something that I was always really passionate about. I loved journalism, I loved writing and leading teams. And so again, it shouldn't be a terribly huge shock, the kind of work that I'm doing now. But if I had gone back several years to my college days or soon after college, I would not have been able to tell you that this is the trajectory my career would have taken. I wouldn't have been able to tell you that I would get a master's degree in public administration. I wouldn't be able to tell you that I would have worked in state government. I wouldn't have been able to tell you that I would have continued my education to obtain a law degree at night while working during the day. So it's, I think I often hear from my clients and people I mentor that, they have concerns about what they're going to do and how they're going to decide and kind of what path they should take. And I think my main takeaway for you here today is that it's okay if you don't know. It's okay if you don't know. Most of us don't know. We just kind of see opportunities, and if they seem appealing and feasible, we go after them, we seize them. And so I do want to encourage you to be proactive, and we will talk about that when I pull up my slides. And I do want to encourage you to be receptive to opportunities that come your way and to create opportunities for yourself, because it's not just about sitting by passively and hoping that good things happen. We need to, as they say, create our own luck. But it's okay if you don't know exactly how things are going to turn out, because for most of us, our crystal balls are not working right now or ever. And so we don't know what the future holds for us. But all we can do is put in the preparation, put in the work, make those connections, form those relationships, and show what we can do through our good work. So those are my introductory remarks. And just before I dive into my slides, I'm happy to take questions if anybody would like to come off mute about anything I just said, or if you'd like to put something in the chat. And if you have any questions today that you'd like to put in the chat now as well, just related to job searching, please feel free to add those. Marissa is going to help me keep track of those. And after we get through a couple of questions, then I'll dive into my slides and we'll get into some nitty gritty of job searching. So feel free to type any questions into the chat if they pertain to what I just shared or anything about job searching, and we'll do our best to cover those today. Okay, I guess I answered everybody's questions in my remarks. That's awesome. All right, I'm going to dive into my slides. Maybe questions will come as we go along. So give me a moment and I will share my screen. Marissa, can you see my slides?
Yes, we are good to go.
Great. All right. So we are going to launch into job search strategies to help you launch your career. And never fear, if some of you feel like your career launched a long time ago, that is fine, because these principles will apply to you as well. Today, we're going to explore how to take the lead with your career, how to pinpoint what could be holding you back, relationship building strategies to help you tap into the hidden job market, key communications principles to lead an effective job search, strategies to gain and convey relevant experience, and job boards for mission-driven individuals. So first of all, how to take the lead with your career. Related to what I was just telling you a moment ago, I encourage you not to let others dictate what your career path will look like. There are lots of different ways to lead a fulfilling, impactful career and lots of paths to achieve your goals. You can do this through jobs, side gigs, volunteer work, projects. You might decide to create your own business and be an entrepreneur. And when it comes to your career and your life, you don't control everything, but there is a lot that you can control. So using the following strategies, you can adopt a proactive approach to make the most of the aspects that you can control. So first, we're going to do a poll. The question is, what could be holding you back? So Marissa, if you could pull up the poll, there are four or five options. We have an other. So if none of these apply to you, then you could choose other. The first one is, I'm not submitting many applications because I'm having a hard time finding positions to apply for. The second one is, I'm submitting applications, but I'm not getting responses. The third option is, I'm getting responses, but I'm not getting past initial interviews. And the next one is, I've been a finalist for positions of interest, but I haven't secured offers. So take another 30 seconds for the poll, and then we will see where we land. Okay, almost everyone's voted. Let's give it another couple seconds. All right, so the top response was the first one, A, which is I'm not submitting many applications because I'm having a hard time finding positions to apply for. And the second most common is I'm submitting applications, but I'm not getting responses. So what I'll be doing in my remarks is I will be focusing on A and B. We will cover the others as well. And there are many common themes among these. Thank you for the poll, Marissa.
Absolutely.
So
The results disappeared from people's screens.
yes, I think so,
cool.
or I
Just want to
minimized.
make sure they aren't up for
Yes,
the whole
thank
presentation.
you. So the reason it's so important to ask ourselves this question of how far through the hiring process am I tending to get is because if you don't pinpoint it, then you really have no idea where to begin. You just don't know what the problem is. So this is really basically identifying what's the problem, and then we can develop the solution and take action. So scenario A, we'll spend the most time covering this, and then secondarily, the next most time on B. So this one again is I'm not submitting many applications because I'm having a hard time finding positions to apply for. So in this type of situation, these are some common things that you want to keep in mind. First of all, you may have what we call limiting beliefs that are preventing you from advancing in your career. This could be things like, I'm not good enough, I don't know enough, I don't have enough experience, why would somebody want to hire me? All of those kinds of what we call negative self-talk could be part of the problem. So what I always say to my coaching clients is that you have to believe in yourself and understand the strengths that you have and the qualities that you bring to your work situations before you can expect other people to believe in you and in those qualities. So it's really important that you engage in activities that help you build your confidence, help you build your skill set, and really connect with things that are meaningful for you. You want to be working with people who really help, build you up and who you can feel a strong sense of team with. So it's important to seek that out. And it doesn't only have to be through a job or a fellowship. It could be through other activities that you might be engaged in. The second thing you want to think about is you want to raise your self-awareness. So what's your personality, your skills, your values, your work styles, your interests, and your key competencies? And fortunately, there are a number of tools, including many free tools that are available online that can help you achieve this higher level of self-awareness. Having this self-awareness is so important because it helps us identify things that we need to work on, opportunities for growth. It also helps us identify our strengths, which is so important to have a strong understanding of if we're going to market ourselves effectively. And it also helps us speak about ourselves when we are in situations such as informational interviews or job interviews. So I definitely encourage you to take the time to do some of these types of assessments. There's a website called ONET Online, which is a really terrific resource through the Department of Labor, and that has many of these types of assessments available for free. So you want to make sure you save the results. I recommend saving everything in one place, like one spreadsheet with different tabs so that you can easily keep track of all of your career development information. The next thing that I would suggest is raising your awareness about what types of organizations and roles are suitable for you. So if you know you're super passionate about food justice or renewable energy or transportation, what you really want to do is start honing in on what are those organizations that are doing work in that space that you feel like you want to get to know more about. And then making sure that you're researching them, you're visiting their website, looking at who works there and what their backgrounds are, what kinds of issues this organization is focused on, how do they talk about their work, what kinds of visuals do they use to convey the work that they're doing and the issues they're working to address. You want to connect with them on things like social media. LinkedIn is a great way to find out what a lot of organizations and individuals are up to. And it's also a really important tool for you to build your own personal brand and start to be seen as a leader in the space that you want to be a part of. So making sure that you're really focusing on those organizations, really getting to know them and starting to build relationships with them is crucial. And then in terms of the roles, do you see yourself in more of a communications role, a community outreach role, a data analyst type position, policy? There's so many different kinds of roles. You want to start to narrow down on a few of those. You don't have to get it down to just one, but it's hard if there are like 17 different types of roles that you're interested in. It's hard to talk about your interests because there are just too many. And it's also really hard to do an effective job search and find what kinds of job descriptions you should even be looking at. So I recommend choosing a handful of types of roles, and you want to make sure that you're looking at ones that are at an appropriate level for you. So if you're 22 years old and you maybe have, a couple years of experience through college, through internships, through AmeriCorps and so forth, you don't usually want to be applying to roles that have titles like director or senior vice president, because those are going to be too senior for you and they're going to require many more years of experience. So you want to make sure that you are identifying positions that have titles like coordinator, junior analyst, associate, things like that, which are going to be more junior roles and would be more appropriate for where you are in your career. But recognize that every organization has its own structure and hierarchy. And so what they call an associate at one place might be called something else in another organization. And what can help is to look at the org chart or look at the staff directory on their website or on LinkedIn to get a sense of what the titles are and sort of what that hierarchy looks like, so you can see where you would fit into that. And then you want to make changes to how you're conducting your search. So basically, if you're spending lots of time on job boards and submitting applications, some people I hear from, they're applying to something like 20 jobs a week. But the problem is that they're usually not customizing their resume and their cover letter. And instead, they're just sending a generic application off to lots of different organizations for many different types of roles. And that usually does not go very well. So it's really important to make sure that you're doing a close reading of the job description and you're really analyzing what is it that they're looking for. Does this sound like a good fit for me? And then tailoring your, customizing your resume and your cover letter for that specific organization and that role. Now, that does take more time, but the idea is to submit fewer applications that are higher quality and more customized, as opposed to just lots of applications. And then the last thing I'll say on this slide is about tapping into what we call the hidden job market and embracing what's called happenstance. So this is basically the hidden job market is the notion that many people do not find their jobs through looking on job boards and submitting applications. That is really the minority of the time how we land a job. So if you're spending all your time looking at job boards and submitting applications, the problem with that is that you're missing out on this huge percentage of jobs which are in the hidden job market. And what this means is many organizations start with who they know when they have an opening, when they have a need. So they will reach out to their network. And this means that in many cases, they do not even publicly post a job opportunity. So if you're looking on those job boards, you're not even going to see this opportunity. But if you have a robust network who you are regularly in touch with and you're providing value to that network, which we'll get into in a moment, you are more likely to find out about opportunities and be able to go further in the hiring process. So that is what the hidden job market is all about. It's really about networks, and it's about finding out about the jobs that aren't going to make it onto the job boards so that you actually have access to more work opportunities. And then happenstance is, let me give you an example. There are lots of online events, many interesting, interactive online events where you can attend, many for free, and you can connect with people who care about the same kinds of things that you do. And you can actually, meet people and start forming relationships, and you never know where those may lead. So the idea of happenstance is that you sort of keep an eye out for what's happening and what sounds interesting to you, and you attend that event, or you help out with that project, and you see where it leads. So that's what happenstance is all about. So let me pause and see if we have some questions, and then we'll move on to scenario B.
Yeah, there are some questions. So Anna had asked, what are the most effective ways to look for opportunities? Job boards and other websites can make you feel like one of 1,000 applicants. And there were a couple members in the chat who agreed with her on that.
Absolutely. So we'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. So I'll hold off on that for right this moment. But if I don't answer it enough for you in a few minutes, please speak up and we can dive into it even further. What other questions do we have, Marissa?
Amy had asked, or had said, I would love to hear tips for cold calling or cold emailing organizations that I'm interested in working with.
Sure. So it's ideal to come to an organization through a mutual contact and actually avoid cold calling whenever possible. So a strategy that you can use is to have a LinkedIn profile as a starting point, and to start building your network through the people you already know. So come up with a list of, say, 20 people who you know, and then see if they're on LinkedIn. And if they are, send them a personalized invitation to connect. And then you'll start to see, as you keep growing that network, by adding people who you actually already know in real life, you will be able to start seeing that you now actually have access to hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are the contacts of your contacts. Now, just because somebody is a contact doesn't mean they actually know each other or they know each other very well. So you don't want to assume that just because somebody is connected to somebody that they know each other very well, but you can ask. So don't be afraid to reach out to somebody in your network and say, hi, so-and-so, I saw that you're a connection with this other person, and I'm really interested in the work that they do and their organization. Would you be willing to make an introduction? And I can provide you with a couple of sentences to make that easy for you. And most times, if you're writing to somebody you know, they will say yes to you when you make a request like that. And one of the keys is to make it easy for them. So if something's going to take me 30 seconds, I'm more likely to do it than if it's going to take 3 minutes. And I'm definitely more likely to do it if it's going to take 30 seconds than it's going to take 15 minutes or half an hour, right? And so you want to make sure that when you're making asks of people, that you're being respectful of their time, and that you are acknowledging that they might have a lot going on, and that your job search is not really their top priority, or your career development, or your network building. And so you want to make it really easy for them to say yes and do what you are requesting. And so one way to do that is to do 90% of the work for them, which means sending a couple of sentences that they can basically copy and paste that is, something about yourself and kind of why you want to connect with that other person. For instance, that organization might focus on renewable energy, and they have an internship that you're interested in, or you saw a position listed on their website and you'd like to learn more, or something like that. So you want to be very specific and succinct, and just send a couple of sentences to this person who you're hoping will make an introduction for you, so that you make it really fast and easy for them to make that introduction. So that's about referrals. But let me get back to what you asked about, which is if you do reach out cold. So a strategy that I have for that is, say that you don't have any connections that you're aware of. So my first recommendation was, see if you have somebody who is a mutual contact and they can make an introduction. That's the ideal scenario. But if that's not the case, then you want to try to build a relationship with that organization. And so one way that you could go about that is by being where they are. So you might have heard, go to where the people are, in terms of things like community outreach, community engagement, voter mobilization, all kinds of things, right? Well, what does that look like? Let's actually ask people to put in the chat ideas for how you could be where the people are who you want to get to know. Just take like 30 seconds and throw something in the chat if you have an idea about that. Marissa, could you read off if there are any items in the chat, please?
Yeah, we have a couple of things coming in. A lot of folks
Great.
said volunteer events. We have local farmers markets, webinars, workshops, cleanup days, other community events.
Great.
People have also seconded the webinars and other events.
Yeah, lots of ideas. So wonderful. So for instance, if I wanted to build a relationship with the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, to keep with that theme from earlier, I would want to go to their website. I would want to make sure I sign up for their emails. I connect with them on social media, that I find out what events they're hosting, right? Whether those are online or in person. There are more options now, really, to connect with people than pre-COVID because there are so many online opportunities. And in the past, you mostly had to be in person someplace, and that was kind of limiting for a lot of reasons. And so now I would say it's actually easier than ever to build relationships with organizations and individuals. So if you kind of learn the strategies and take advantage of them. So you want to be at the events that that organization is hosting, whether virtual or in person, if possible. And you can engage with them through things like social media. You can amplify their messaging because then their communications staff are going to know that you exist. And being in communications, I can tell you that there are a few things that someone in communications loves more than when their message is amplified. And so that could be as simple as a retweet or, a share on Instagram or Facebook, or LinkedIn. I mean, there's a lot of different platforms. But basically, you want to start to build a relationship with that organization. And so I think of it less as just picking up the phone and, or sending some just email, and more as like you are trying to get to know them, support their work. Maybe you volunteer with them. Maybe you see if they have a project that you could help them out with. There are lots of ways to build a relationship, but that would be kind of the second option that I would suggest. And really have a clear idea of why it is that you want to reach out to them. Why do you want to form this relationship? And is there someone specific within the organization who you would really like to get to know? And going back to what I said earlier, if you do have really specific reasons, you want to make sure that you do your research before you reach out to them so that you're not expecting them to do the work for you. The last thing you want to do is seem like you're lazy. So you want to make sure that you've done your homework, you've researched the organization, you've read the people's bios, and you have some really thoughtful questions to ask them. For instance, if you did want to request an informational interview. So it's clear to them that you have done your homework and then you're being more respectful of their time. Any other questions, Marissa, before we move on?
Yeah, there are a couple more.
Okay.
One from Evan that's kind of related to that, and Sarah, I will bounce back to your question also, but Evan's question was, how do you maintain relationships with people that you have done informational interviews with? Sometimes I feel like the relationship ends after the conversation is over.
Yeah, great question. The short answer is that thank yous and follow-ups are really crucial. I will get into relationships in a moment, though, so I don't want to spoil that for now. So we'll get to that in a moment.
Okay, awesome. And Sarah's question was how to find jobs and organizations that are interesting to our interests and skill sets. Jobs on job boards seem very generic, and it's hard to know what they entail.
Right. So again, this comes back to the whole hidden job market and the relationship building. And the more that you get to know an organization, just for itself, not because you're just looking at, job listings, the more you will understand what that organization is about, what challenges they're trying to address, and what their needs are. For instance, sometimes you can even just look at an organization's social media or website or annual report. And if you look at it with sort of a close eye, you can often find opportunities for improvement, which can tell you certain things. Certainly being in communications, I'm constantly paying attention to what does the website look like, how easy is it to use and to find the information you're looking for. Um, what is their social media presence like, how engaging is it, and when you go to their website, like how up to date is it, and engaging and everything like that. So by really like focusing on half a dozen or even 10 organizations that you're really interested in, I would say do that. Don't even worry if they actually have a job posting. Just focus on those organizations that you are most interested in and really start getting to know them and studying them, because as you do that and you engage with them, they're going to start to get to know you. And then over time, there'll be trust built up. So I wouldn't approach them and say, hey, I noticed your website's really terrible, because that's not usually a great way to kick off a relationship, right? But you might just contact them and say, hey, I was, looking at your website. I noticed your newsletter and I saw that you invite guest writers. I would love to contribute a piece on renewable energy or on blah, 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 whatever topic is relevant to that organization, and see what they say. So doing things like content creation, creating something that they can use is a really great way to, build a relationship and have them start to see you as like, oh, this is somebody who could be helpful to us. And then that often leads to a job. Any other questions, Marissa?
Yeah, one other comment on that point though, the content that you ask to share via a newsletter doesn't need to necessarily be new content. Like that could be something that you have existing if you've written other pieces. So I just wanted to make
Great
that
point.
that you don't necessarily
Yeah.
need to be creating new content specifically for an organization.
Absolutely. Definitely. Whenever you don't have to start from scratch, if you have something, maybe even that you just change like 15% of the content just to kind of rework it a little bit to make it more appropriate for that specific target audience, and then you can reuse 85% of what you've already created, that can be a really efficient practice. So thanks for that suggestion. All right. Any other questions before we move on?
There's one final question, and I think you will. Oh, two final questions actually, and
Sure.
one of them I think you will address later. Abby said, "My term with AmeriCorps is teaching me new things I didn't necessarily gain experience in at college. If I'm wanting to steer my career in this newer direction, how do I make myself seem valuable to individuals in a newer career?" And then Eric had also asked, somewhat related to Evan's question earlier, which was about maintaining relationships after an informational interview. How do you gain comfort in talking about yourself and your experiences in a networking environment outside of a formal interview?
Sure. Great questions, everyone. So I'm just making notes to myself. Okay, so let's see, valuable in a new career. So I'll get into this a little bit more, but my short answer is that you don't need to ask permission to do the kind of work that you want to do. You can just start doing it. And what do I mean by that? You could do something like start a blog and start creating content on topics that you're passionate about. You can start interviewing people who are in the field that you want to be in. And if it's okay with them, you can publish those interviews on your blog and then amplify them on a site like LinkedIn to get them in front of more people, and make sure you're, tagging the people you interviewed so that it shows up in front of more people if it's okay with them. You can, do a research project in conjunction with an organization without working there. You could just do it as a project, couple hours a week or something like that. And maybe it's something that they could publish or use in their work. So you really want to start to build up a portfolio of work samples. I think that's incredibly important, especially as you're doing any kind of career pivot or entering a field that's new for you. You need to have some things that show, I know some things about these issues, and that it really shows your interest and your passion. Now, you don't need to be a subject matter expert in everything, and you don't even need to be a subject matter expert in what you want to go into, but you do need to convey certain qualities that would make someone want to hire you and would make them want to work with you and have you as part of their team. So that's where you really want to focus on what we call transferable skills. And we'll get into this a little bit more. In terms of talking about yourself, one great way to practice is through events. So we could even do an exercise here where, maybe we'll just do this right now. So if you were at an online event and you had the opportunity to introduce yourself in the chat box, and you could share, say, 2 sentences about yourself, you want to think about strategically, what do you want the people at that event to know about you? Because it's like if you're at an event and you're like talking to different people and you say, "Hi, I'm Erica, nice to meet you," and somebody's like, "So what's your deal?" And is that, "Well, I blah, 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 blah," right? And so what do you say? And so it's good to practice, because the more that we practice, the more comfortable we get with it. And events are a great low risk environment for that. I'm talking about online events mostly at this point. And so the chat provides a way to do it, if it's not verbally. And sometimes you get to do one, or you could do both. And when you can write it, it also kind of gives you more time to think about how you want to say it. But it would be good to kind of cultivate a couple sentences that you want to share with people, so that you don't have to think too much every time, but you want to make sure that you are customizing that message for that audience. So if I'm at an event about transportation, I would focus more on how I chair the board of the statewide bicycling coalition, Mass Bike, and that I'm passionate about helping to create safer streets for everyone. As opposed to if I'm at an event about some other topic, then I would kind of focus on some other aspect of myself. And so you want to think about the different dimensions of yourself and the different interests and skills and experiences you have, and then use that to adjust how you introduce yourself. So that being said, let's do a quick exercise where you just think about an event where you feel like let's just say it's an online event, and you feel like there'd be a lot of people there who you would have like similar interests with, and people there you would want to connect with and get to know, after the event. How are you going to introduce yourself in the chat so that you kind of catch the attention of the kinds of people who you want to connect with? Again, this is just like 2 sentences, but I want you to imagine what kind of event that would be. And then we're going to just take a moment for you to craft a couple of sentences. Don't worry about it being, the best 2 sentences you've ever written. Just, this is an exercise. This is just practice. And then just put it in the chat, and we can read about each other and get to know more about each other. And it'll spark a lot of interest, like, oh, they're into such and such. So am I. I'd love to get to know that person more, right? So I will put myself on mute so everybody can think quietly, and then just start putting your, 2 intro sentences into the chat.
We have a couple coming into the chat, Erica. Do you want me to read them out loud or hold off? Let people continue to think.
Yeah, let's let people continue thinking and writing for a moment. And then let's see if we have like 3 volunteers who'd like to read theirs out loud.
Perfect.
All right, thanks everyone for sharing. So can we get one volunteer to start us off who would like to share their introduction out loud?
I can do that. I asked the question, so I'm responsible for this.
Okay, thank you for taking responsibility, Eric.
Sure. So hi, I'm Eric, and I have broad interests in wildlife conservation, particularly in collaboration with local communities. I really enjoy working in interdisciplinary teams that bridge communities and scientists and conservation practitioners.
Yay. Well done. Thank you. Would one more person like to share theirs, and then we'll kind of do a little debrief?
I can share mine if no one else wants to.
Please.
So thanks for having me. My name is Patrick Allison Jr., and I'm a crayfish biologist interested in biogeography, conservation, and educational outreach of crayfishes and freshwater ecosystems.
All right, nicely done. All right, do we have one more person who's really eager to? That'll be the last one.
I'll go.
Wonderful.
Hi, I'm Joelle. I'm an AmeriCorps member serving as the Land Stewardship Coordinator at the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, where I engage volunteers through a large urban park system, Boston and Brookline. I'm interested in environmental justice programming, science communications, and connecting people to land and resources.
Yay! Nicely done, Joelle. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so now let's do a little debrief. What did you all notice about these introductions? You could either speak kind of globally about all 3, or if you want to pull out something specific. You know, what was important about what they shared? Like, how would these kinds of introductions be useful? Anyone want to come off mute and share your thoughts?
Hi, this is Nick. This seems really useful because, especially in these events, people might have a short attention span. So by packaging it really nicely, it kind of gives them a really good idea of who you are in a way they can digest it.
Absolutely. So they're succinct, right? In just a quick skim, 5 to 10 seconds, you get this little like snapshot of who this person is, what they're engaged with, what they're interested in, what they might have some expertise in, maybe something about some of their skills. Great. Thanks, Nick. One or two other people want to share kind of why they think these types of introductions that these three shared could be useful.
Yeah, I can share. I think that they all gave really good jumping off points to start a conversation. Like there was something that I at least could have asked each of them about to start a conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Anna. So these are great conversation starters. And so when I see certain words that jump out at me, I'm thinking, oh, I just saw an internship listing or a job listing or this project that is about this topic that this person is mentioning, right? And so it's like that whole happenstance thing I was talking about a few minutes ago. Like, who knows? Because I'm seeing job opportunities every day. I'm posting many of them on LinkedIn, but not every single one of them. By the way, I encourage you all to send me a personalized invitation to connect on LinkedIn. And if you check out my feed, you will see lots of information about job opportunities and events and other interesting things, hopefully. And so yeah, it's helping me say, oh yeah, and I know someone who maybe I could connect this person to, right? And so it's kind of enabling us to create value for each other because we start to get an idea of what each other's about. Great. Now, I want to also pose this. And we could take like 30 seconds to do this if anyone's game. And it would be just another iteration of this, which is really focused on kind of the question that employers really want to know about, which is like, what can you do for me? How can you help me solve my problems? You know, whether those are my organizational problems within my organization or like global issues, whatever issues I'm working on, whether it's hunger, whether it's climate change, whether it's racism, whatever the issues are that I'm focused on. How can you help me solve these issues? Do the work that I'm doing? How can you help my organization's mission? And so if you think about that, how could you do just a slight variation on your introduction that kind of gets at that? So I don't have to think as much. I can just kind of see what you're saying and I go, oh, this person, is an experienced project manager working on XYZ type of projects. Then I go, oh, yeah, I just saw this job opening that sounds like a really great fit for someone like that, right? I don't have to think too much because you have done the thinking for me, which falls under that category of make it easy for people to help you by doing the work for them. Okay, so let's take 30 seconds or so. And if you have an idea, whether you wrote one before or not, if you were to share 2 sentences, again, at an online event that has lots of people who you would want to get to know, let's say you're job hunting, how would you want to phrase your introduction so that you make it clear what you can do for me and say I'm like your target employer? All right, so let's just take a few seconds and anyone who has an idea, throw it in the chat and then we'll do a quick share. Remember, this doesn't have to be perfect. This is just practice. This is just an exercise. I'd love to see 5 or so examples in the chat. So I see one from earlier that I think has some pieces of this. Would Barry be interested in sharing yours?
Trying to come off mute, sorry.
Hi, Barry. Would you like to share what your sentences?
Yep, I'm scrolling
Okay.
back up towards it. I just got my second shot yesterday, so I'm
Oh,
pretty groggy right now.
got it. I'm happy to read it for you if that's easier. I have it in front of me.
I found it.
Okay.
So I wrote, hello, my name's Barry Matthews. I'm an environmental historian and storyteller committed to inspiring ecological consciousness. My work focuses on fostering more sustainable relationships with the non-human world and expanding access to the outdoors for all people.
Yay! Well, even though you're not feeling fantastic, you wrote a very lovely introduction, I have to say. So let's have 1 or 2 other people share, and then we'll do a quick debrief about these statements and kind of how they get at the, like, what can you do for me question that's so important. Anyone want to come off mute and share? Well, I see some really great introductions in the chat, but it's okay if folks don't want to read them aloud. So I guess, you know, to just kind of conclude, some of the best practices here that we want to be thinking about are, what are the keywords that people need to see in order to know that we might be somebody they want to connect with? Marissa, there's somebody seeking to enter the event, but I'll let you manage that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so so thinking about those keywords, right? So I see words like forest pathology, I see soil microbiology, I see public education, I see environmental programming, I see building bridges with communities, scientists, and conservation practitioners. I see global health, I see food systems, right? And so, like, really making sure that those keywords are in your introduction is really important. And then thinking about, you know, what is it that you can do? Can you manage projects? Can you recruit recruit and manage volunteers? Can you craft compelling content, compelling digital content? Like, maybe throw in just kind of 1 or 2 things that you can do really well that you like to do, and just kind of say, I do this, right? So somebody put, I facilitate such and such, or I work on this, or I am focusing on such and such. So that's a way of saying it, where you don't just have to say, I'm interested in such and such, or I enjoy doing such and such, but it's actually just, it's a more sort of like you're owning it. It's a more kind of confident statement to say, I do this thing. You don't have to use the word do, but it's one approach. But it's sort of taking ownership for what you want to be doing by actually saying you're already doing it, if that is the case. Okay, so, and you don't have to be working in that thing. Again, you could be involved in something in some way without actually having a job in that. And then you could still talk about that as something that you do. Okay, so we're going to move on so that we can get through some more content here. So remember earlier when we did the poll? Well, the second most common response was B, which is that I'm submitting applications, but I'm not getting responses. So what does that look like? Well, you may need to reevaluate whether these roles are a suitable fit. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier. You want to pay attention to what level role it is and how much experience it calls for. Now, a note about that. If the job description says that they are looking for 2 years of experience, I bet most of you can make the case that you have 2 years of experience. Raise your hand if you feel like you have 2 years of relevant experience for the kinds of jobs that you would be interested in. And if you don't raise your hand, I am going to try to convince you that you should raise your hand. I'm seeing lots of hands. Yay. Okay. Amazing. Right. So is there anybody who's interested in just sharing a couple sentences about why they raised their hand? Why do you feel like you have a couple of years of experience doing the kind of stuff you want to do moving forward? Anyone?
I'll go ahead.
Thank you, Beth.
I have a degree in a related field, so I was an environmental science major. And I'm looking for jobs in education and agriculture, and I've completed, well, I worked at like my campus farm for 4 years, which had like an education component.
Oh, wow. Terrific.
And then like did like 2 internships in environmental education in undergrad, and now in like almost completing this year of service as youth education and sustainable ag coordinator.
Fantastic. What organization are you with right now?
I'm at Round the Bend Farm in Dartmouth.
Awesome. So you have lots of different types of experience. And if you added all that up, approximately how many years of experience would you say that you could make the case that you have? I mean, at least 2, right?
Yeah, at least
Yeah.
2. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like it's hard to get taken seriously. You're like, oh, I had that job when I was an undergrad. But
Right. And so the way that we talk about that is really important. So if you emphasize that it's something you did when you were, 17, it's easy for people to minimize that and not take it as seriously. So how we talk about it and how we show what we can do is really important. So again, it starts with you recognizing that that experience was valuable. And a way that you can do that is you can make a list of your major accomplishments from that work. So get away from I was responsible for these things and move toward an accomplishments focused framing, which is a best practice for your resumes and your cover letters and your LinkedIn profiles. So not just I was responsible for these things or I did this stuff, but instead, here's how I brought value through this experience that I was a part of. I created this, I grew this, I collaborated to do this thing, I saved this much money, I brought in this much money, I improved processes to make things more efficient. I developed this, I helped us build this program which won this award. There are so many ways that we can communicate about accomplishments. So, if you focus on the skills that you built through those experiences, the relationships that you built through those experiences, and the kinds of accomplishments that you had, that you generated through that work, it makes it much easier to talk about it and be taken seriously. Is that helpful, Beth?
yeah, that is really helpful. Also, I don't know if you'll like get to this, but like sometimes I just feel awkward saying that stuff because I don't want to be like bragging.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of people
it's like
struggle with.
You want to
Yeah.
be like, I don't want to be like, oh, well, I won this award.
Right.
But it's like something you want to highlight. So it's
It
like,
is. Yeah, it can be challenging. So a couple tips on how to handle that. I looked up the definition of brag because it was something that a lot of my clients were saying. And bragging is actually basically self-aggrandizement when it is not warranted. So bragging is very different from sharing our accomplishments. If it is actually something you did, it is not bragging to share that. So we have to first acknowledge that, okay? And then we have to get comfortable talking about it. So the language that we use and the way that we do it really matters. So one way that you could think about it is that it's storytelling. And I don't mean you're making stuff up. I just mean that you are sharing your story. Okay. And so this is when we get into things like personal branding, which is so important for things like LinkedIn, but also when we're interviewing and even our resume and our cover letter. We really want to think about how do we want the world to see us? And so based on that and thinking about who our target audiences are, what do we have to show? How do we have to say things? How do we have to show up in the world? And so if you see yourself as a leader or as an emerging leader or as a contributor, in the like sustainable agriculture as one example, then how do you create that identity so that is how others perceive you as well? And so it's not about bragging. This has nothing to do with bragging. This has to do with basically sharing with people, here's what I can do on these topics based on my previous experience. I have academic experience in this area studying XYZ. I have hands-on experience in this area doing blah, 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 blah. And I'm excited about the work that your organization is doing, leading the way in da, 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 da. Okay, so we share a couple things about ourselves, our background, things that we've done, things we can show for ourselves, okay, accomplishments, not bragging, sharing our story. And then we bring it back to them because it's not just about us, it's about the organization, it's about their needs, right? If you just talk about yourself, you're not really going to connect with your audience. And you want to connect with them, right? And especially through online events and interviews, it's extremely important to know how to connect with your conversation partners and not just talk at them and bore them by droning on forever, or feeling so uncomfortable sharing about yourself that you don't really say much of anything. So you got to strike that balance. I hope that's helpful, Beth.
Yeah, that is. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Okay, so let's continue with scenario B and then we'll keep rolling. I can't believe we're already getting close to time here. So, all right, we have about what, 24 minutes or so left. Okay, so scenario B, back to this. So reconfiguring how you allocate your time so that you're tapping into the hidden job market. This goes back to what I was saying earlier. So for instance, some of the people I meet with, they're spending something like 80% of their time on job boards, searching, looking for job listings, looking at job listings, maybe submitting a bunch of applications, and they're really not getting anywhere. And so what I encourage them to do is really flip how they're spending their time so that those activities actually become the minority of your time, and things like participation in events, either online or in person, researching your top target organizations and really starting to build relationships with them. Creating your own content and sharing content by others on platforms like LinkedIn or your own website or blog are ways to do this. Working on projects that are interesting to you. These are all ways that you can advance your career development, and they're actually a lot more fun than just looking at job boards all day too. So that's a benefit. And, if you feel uncomfortable going to online events or, going to things where you don't really know people, see if you can get a friend to attend as well, spread the word about the event and do some, personalized invitations to some people in your network, some of your friends, some of your, AmeriCorps, fellow AmeriCorps members, and like, see if you can get a little group to go to the same event together. So then that way you don't feel like you're, alone with a bunch of people you don't know. But it's also okay to go alone and just meet new people. And most of the time we're much harsher judges of ourselves than other people are of us, right? Like you might be worried about what you're wearing today, but 99% of the people on this call are not going to remember what you were wearing today 1 minute after this call, and they probably aren't even noticing right now either. So we tend to be much more self-conscious than others are in terms of, evaluating us. So go easy on yourself. All right. And then the third thing I'll say about this is reworking your job application materials and closely tailoring them to your target positions. I can't stress this enough. I just actually got a message on LinkedIn from someone who approached me a few weeks ago and was saying they were job searching and they were really not getting anywhere and so forth. And I asked them like 1 or 2 questions to get a sense of what where they were kind of running into some roadblocks. And it turned out that they were sending out lots of non-customized applications. So basically the same cover letter over and over again, didn't matter the organization, didn't matter the role, no changes to their resume. They'd have like a standard, just kind of objective at the top that was generic, and which we don't recommend. It's advisable to have a short professional summary at the top that's tailored based on the organization and the role that you are applying to. Don't just have a standard objective at the top of your resume that doesn't change and that's just like seeking to contribute to an environmental organization. Like that's not going to help you. So make sure that you're doing the end of the story, sorry, is that I gave a couple pieces of advice about applying to fewer roles and making sure that the materials were customized. And a couple days ago, I saw on LinkedIn that this individual just got a job. And so I wrote and said, congratulations. And she said, thank you so much. I did what you suggested. I started customizing my job application materials. And within a few weeks, I got a job. And I was like, oh, well, that's great. I'm so glad to hear that. So it really works. I'm not saying, like you apply to one job and you're going to get it because you tailored your materials. I wish it were that easy. You will still have to apply probably to several positions and, build relationships and all of that, but you will not have to exhaust yourself sending out so many applications and just getting nowhere. And you will increase your chances that your materials will get looked at, that you'll get past the applicant tracking systems, which are extremely common, which are basically software products that many employers use, which will scan your materials and see if they want to filter you out or they want to have a conversation with you. So it's really important that your materials are using the keywords that are in the job description. And you can just automatically get eliminated from consideration if it is really clear to the robots or to the humans that you just really are sending the same application over and over again to lots of different organizations and jobs. So extremely important to customize your materials. Okay, we're going to move on to scenario C. Basically, I'm getting responses, but I'm not getting past initial interviews. So in that case, again, you want to reevaluate whether these roles are a suitable fit. You want to revisit how you're preparing for the interviews. One tip I'll give you for interviews, listen up to anyone who has any anxiety around interview prep, is that you want to be prepared to answer behavioral questions. So tell me about a time that you, and then they'll say, whatever they say, right? There are lots of different ways a question like that could go. And you want to have a few examples ready to share when they ask you questions like that. Tell me about a time that you worked on a challenging project as a part of a team. Tell me about a time that you had to work in an ambiguous situation. How did you handle that? Tell me about a time that there's tons of these. So you want to read what the most common behavioral interview questions are. And then you want to think back over your life about your accomplishments. What's the work that you've done that you're most proud of that you really want to share because it's related in some way to what you would like to be doing moving forward. If not in terms of the issues, then in terms of like the kinds of skills that you used or the kind of environment that you were part of. And then you want to be prepared to share a short story, like, 60 seconds, maximum, I'd say 90 seconds about that instance. And, you know, if you want to combine a couple examples together, you can with a theme, but you just want to make sure you don't go into so much detail that you lose your audience. So behavioral interview questions, extremely important to prepare for those. And the other interview tip I'll give you is that when I work with my career coaching clients, one of the things that I drill them on is the question, tell me about yourself, because that is a really common interview question. And if you can feel comfortable introducing yourself in approximately 60 seconds, maybe you can get it down to 45 if you're really succinct, you're able to start the interview off from a place of strength, from a place of confidence and eloquence, and you'll make a great first impression on your conversation partner. So you want to make sure that you practice how to answer that. And again, even if they don't say it exactly as tell me about yourself, they will ask you some variation on that question, and you don't want to be caught like well, you know, you don't want that to happen. So you want to be prepared, and that involves practice. It might involve writing out your interview responses, writing out your, you know, your narrative, like what kind of some bullet points of what you plan on saying for tell me about yourself. And then just practicing it and timing yourself to make sure that it doesn't go on for, you know, 2 minutes. You want to make sure that it's, you know, somewhere around 1 minute. And again, you're going to tailor that for the people you're speaking to, for this role, for this organization. You're not going to give the exact same tell me about yourself response to just anybody you speak to. Because you want to convey that you're really interested in this role and in this organization. So those are some interview tips. Okay, and then the last one is prepare for how to respond to questions about compensation. So we can't get too in depth on negotiation today because we don't have the time, but the thing that I will say about this is that you want to do your research, you want to have a sense of the marketplace and what you can get paid to do the kind of work that you're seeking to do in whatever market you're looking in. If you're looking in Greater Boston, if you're looking in, you know, Philly or New York, wherever you're looking, you want to do some research on websites like salary.com, Glassdoor. There are many websites, and I do have a blog on this on my website with some links. And a number of things you want to be thinking about, not just the paycheck, but the package. Because if you get a job that pays $40,000 a year, but it doesn't provide health insurance, that is very different from a job that pays, you know, $38,000 a year, but does provide health insurance benefits. So you really want to be thinking about this holistically. It's really not just about the paycheck. But one of the things that people are often afraid of is that they're going to price themselves out of a job by you know, having a salary requirement of say $50,000, but the organization is only planning on paying $40,000 for that role. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are figuring out what you really need to live off of. So if you have school loans that you need to pay off, you need to factor that into what your budget is. And to be honest, if a role is only going to pay $40,000 and that's not going to meet your needs, then that's not the role for you. So you don't need to stress about it too much. You need to find something that's going to be the right fit for you and that's going to meet your needs. So in terms of negotiating, what you do not want to put a number out there. When they ask you your salary requirements, the best practice for job seekers is to not say a number. Questions about that? We could do a whole separate workshop just on this. I think, Marissa, you already are maybe having a separate one on negotiation. So we won't go too far down this path, but you want to find out what their budget range is for the position. And then from there, you make your case about what they should offer you. But if they don't list what the salary is for the job, it's not fair for them to make you put a number out there. Especially women tend to, you know, there's a pay gap. There has been for forever, and it hasn't gone away. And so in particular, women run the risk of basically underselling themselves and getting underpaid. And, you know, if you say $35,000 and they're like, oh, well, the position pays 45, but we don't have to tell them that, so we'll just hire them for 35, right? Then like you are really doing yourself a disservice. So you want, if they say to you, what are your salary requirements? You basically want to kind of say back to them something along the lines of, what is the salary range for this position? And then you would be able to, you know, give a reaction to that. But you want this to be really well thought out. So anyway, that is about how to respond to questions on compensation. Again, a much deeper topic than we have time to get into right now, but hopefully there are a couple useful things for you on that. Let me pause and see if there are any questions before we move on to the next one.
Yeah, there was one in the chat about from Gabby. Do you have any specific tips on writing cover letters, particularly on how to introduce yourself in them?
I do. I'm afraid we're not going to be able to get into that too much today. It's a whole conversation. I have a whole system on it. But what I will say briefly is that it starts with a close reading of the job description and really understanding what it is that this organization is seeking. And what you want to do is you want to identify the 3 or so main categories that the role calls for in terms of the responsibilities. I'll give you an example. It could be community outreach, communications, and project management. You want to find those categories in the job description, and sometimes it's easier than other times, depending on how they've structured and organized the information in the job description. But from a close reading and a really good understanding of that job description, that's really the foundation. And then from there, you can much better customize your materials to be responsive to what it is that they are looking for. Because they're telling you in the job description, here are our needs. Now, what I want to say about that is you don't want to take a job description too literally, because job descriptions are not perfect. They are not an absolutely 100% accurate depiction of what that organization needs. It is basically their best guess as to what they need. And it's often like their ideal scenario. Oh, we hope we find somebody who has all this stuff. Well, guess what? Sometimes they don't find that person or they can't pay you know, what that person would be looking for. So it's okay to apply to a position if you only meet something like 70% of the qualifications in there. My only caveat would be if it's like a highly technical role and they really need somebody who does something very specific and you really have no idea how to do that, then like don't waste anybody's time by applying. But most of the time, especially with non-technical types of roles, if you meet around 70% of the qualifications and you're really interested in this organization and this work, I would encourage you to apply. So those are a few things about, you know, how to prepare to write your cover letter. And I'll just finish by saying in the cover letter, you want to make sure that you're being very clear that you really read that job description. And the way that you do that is by making those, what I call buckets, those main job categories, responsibility categories, really clear in your cover letter. And you want to show, not tell. You want to give short examples of the work that you've done. Again, ideally accomplishments focused, as opposed to just, I was responsible for these things. And so show, don't tell. You don't want to say, I'm a good communicator. You want to convey that through a really well-written cover letter. All right, so D would be, I've been a finalist for positions of interest, but I haven't secured offers. So in this case, you may need to put more care into your reference selection and preparation, meaning you only want to put people down as references who are going to say excellent things about you. And you want to make sure you notify them, or, you know, check with them that you can put them down as a reference and notify them that they might be getting contacted by a certain organization so that they are prepared for that. And again, you want to do most of the work for them to make it easy for them to help you, so it's not so much of an imposition, and so that you are setting them up to do a good job. And you can do that by providing them with a couple bullet points of potential initial talking points based on your, past interactions with them. And that will help them be the best references possible for you. The next thing is you want to focus on reputation management and building your personal brand. Something that you should do from time to time is look yourself up online, look up your first and last name and see what happens. You might be surprised. You might actually find results for someone else who has your same name, and you might find things about yourself that don't really portray the identity that you are trying to put out there in the world. So I have articles and blogs on this topic, and there's some great resources out there to help you really build your personal brand and make it so that when people search for you, they find you and they find information about you that you want them to find. So it's about being strategic and learning things like search engine optimization and how you can be creating content on sites like LinkedIn that's going to help you come up higher in the search results, and it's going to help you control what kinds of information people are seeing about you. If you find that you have a really common name, you may want to start using your middle initial, and you might want to include that in your LinkedIn profile and on all of your materials, so that you can be more clearly identified. So there are some strategies like that. You just want to be consistent about it. And then the final thing is that you want to make sure that you're following up with a thank you. If I were interviewing two people for a role, and one of them sends a thank you and one of them doesn't, I can tell you who I'm going to have a better impression of if all other things were equal. And so sending a follow-up thank you is incredibly important, whether it is an informational interview, a job interview, what have you. Just really, a short note, a short email, just saying that you appreciated their time, and a couple other sentences is all you need. Okay, so those are the scenarios. Now, we've already covered a lot of this, so I'm going to run through these pretty quickly. Relationship building. I want you to take just 10 seconds and throw in the chat, what are the qualities that come to mind when you think of a high functioning relationship? What is one word? You think about the best relationships you have in your life. Throw in the chat, what makes those relationships strong? Okay, trust. Reciprocity. Okay, good. Yes, absolutely. So communication for sure. And respect, absolutely. So you want to think about those things as you think about your career development, right? Those are not just qualities of relationships that you have with your friends and your family, your significant others. Those are things that you want to cultivate in your professional relationships as well. We've already talked about the hidden job market. Relationships are like plants. So you want to pay attention to them, but you don't want to overwater them, right? So you want to find that balance where you're keeping in touch with people, but maybe, you're not being too in contact. You don't want to be over communicating. So you want to find that balance where you're respecting other people's time, but you're keeping them in the loop. You want to be on people's minds. And so you want to be adding value. You want to be sharing information. You want to be making introductions of people. You don't just always want to be asking for help, right? A few of you mentioned reciprocity. So that means, it's two ways. It's not just about going to somebody and constantly asking them for help. It's about also helping them and creating value by doing some of the kinds of things we've been talking about today, whether it's offering to help with a project or helping to get the word out about an event that they're hosting, or making an introduction between them and someone else who has similar interests. And we've already talked about the importance of referrals. Okay, so effective communication. So now I want you to take 10 seconds in the chat and just share in general, how would you describe communications that impact you and prompt you to take action? What's a word or two that comes to mind that would describe that? Just throw it in the chat. So some things that we want to keep in mind with effective communications. Again, you want to know your audience, which means doing some research in advance, and you want to tailor the message to them. We've talked about sharing your story. What's your narrative? What drives you to do the work that you do? I shared some of this early on in today's event to model for you how you can do this. And you want to show, not tell. So through your work samples, through visuals that you can share, and through the kinds of writing or other things that you create, you can show what you can do without just having to tell people. So it'll be much more convincing in that way. You want to pay attention to timing and make sure that you're being relevant. And again, follow-up is crucial. So that question came up earlier, what to do after you have the conversation. Well, you want to make sure that you say thank you and you keep in touch. And it's important to be present and consistent. So if you just show up on LinkedIn once a year, or once a month, you're not really going to get seen by many people. It's not really going to have much of an impact. You want to make sure that you're being regularly present on platforms like that so that more people are seeing you and that you're top of mind. So if I find out about a job having to do with crayfish, tomorrow, I know who to let know about that, right? Or soil health or what have you. So if somebody can't think of your name, it's going to be harder for them to share a job or an event with you that might be of interest to you. So you need to kind of be visible and present. And then as we start to get toward the end, you want to gain and convey experience. There are lots of ways to do this. Which aspects of your target industry are of most interest to you? So if you can throw it in the chat. This would be what topic and job function. An example of a topic could be urban agriculture, and an example of a job function could be an outreach coordinator. So if you have an idea of what your target job is right now, throw it in the chat, put the topic and or the job function. We'll just take 10 seconds on that. If you don't know, that's okay. Okay, I'm seeing researcher. Great. Any others? Professor, excellent. Urban planner, okay, awesome. So some guiding principles for this are that, again, as we talked about earlier, you want to count the experience you have. You want to focus on what you bring. You don't have to worry about what you don't have. Focus on what you do bring. And the work that you've done, whether it was as an undergraduate or a gap year or what have you, that is still actual experience. It's okay that it wasn't, so-called professional, full-time, paid work or what have you. You still got something out of that experience and you still made contributions. So don't downplay that and make sure you feel comfortable talking about it. Again, you want to focus on transferable skills and key competencies. This could be things like leadership, decision-making, organizational skills. So focus on those. Don't worry so much about being a subject matter expert. You want to do research about the landscape. What do I mean by that? If you're interested in water policy, you want to make sure that you are researching who is doing work in that space. If you're focused on New England, you want to hone in on who's doing work on water in New England. And if you can be even more specific, like drinking water in New England, that's going to help you really get a sense of who's doing work in that space and what the needs and opportunities are. As we've talked about leveraging projects that you're doing, maybe through AmeriCorps or otherwise, you can gain experience from those, and then that can help you catapult into those areas further into your career. And then again, you want to be realistic about what types of roles you're looking at, given how much experience you have and the skills that you have. But you also can save job descriptions that sound really exciting to you that you're not quite ready for yet, and just put those in an aspirational folder that you revisit, from time to time over the years. Maybe you see some more senior roles that sound really exciting to you. Save those. That's good information about yourself, and that can help you throughout your career to have those as aspirations that you've saved. You asked about job boards. Here are a few examples, and I'm going to provide a handout to Marissa to share with you, which is going to have these and more. So I'm just curious, put a yes in the chat if any of these are ones that are new to you. These are just a few examples. There are many more. The list that I provide will have more examples, and it will have links. So we have corporate social responsibility job boards, environment and sustainability job boards, food job boards, nonprofit and philanthropy, planning, public policy, and government. Just throw a yes in the chat if any of these websites are new to you. Are we getting some yeses, Marissa?
Yeah, we're getting quite a few here.
Okay, awesome. So keep an eye out for that handout that I'll be providing to Marissa, and you can visit those websites and sign up for alerts and set up searches and take a look at the job descriptions. Now, as we've talked about, you don't want to spend all your time on job boards, so beware of the tendency to do that. Think of the job descriptions as research that you're doing that help you gain clarity about what you want and what you don't want. So a recap of what we've covered today: how to take the lead with your own career, how to pinpoint what could be holding you back, those were the scenarios, relationship building strategies to help you tap into the hidden job market, key communications principles to lead an effective job search, strategies to gain and convey relevant experience, and job boards for mission-driven individuals. So I encourage you to stay connected. As I said, send me a quick note on LinkedIn with a personalized invitation to connect, and I will be happy to connect with you. You can just, mention how we met. And I also provide complimentary consultations, which can be set up via my website, and you can check out the career guides and tip sheets I also have at ericamadison.com. And I also have several articles that I've published on LinkedIn on various career development topics for mission-driven individuals. So thank you so much for your attention and participation today. It was a pleasure to be with you. And I'd love you to just throw in the chat one takeaway that you have from today's event, so that I can get some feedback about what you learned today that you find most helpful. Wonderful. Keep them coming. Thank you so much for sharing what you learned from today. I'll just mention a couple of them. I need to spend more time thinking about how to answer the question. Tell me about yourself. Join the club. We all do. I need to work on how to network more effectively, doing more to manage my online self. I like that. Great. Thinking how I introduce myself, creating a LinkedIn profile. Absolutely. So as I said, I have a lot of resources on my website as well as on LinkedIn on many of these topics, and I hope you'll find them helpful. Happy to stick around for a few more minutes if folks want, and you don't have someplace else you have to be.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erica. Let's come off mute if you are comfortable to give a quick round of applause, or you can also see the applause reaction in Zoom.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to pause our recording here.